welcome back to the 12th episode of our podcast, She Said What, where the four of us discuss the modern landscape as women. So today we've got a very special guest who's going to be joining us in our conversation. I'm sure a lot of you already know her, but she's the founder and executive director of the NGO Rutu Chakra, which works to achieve menstrual equity and dignity. So let's welcome Sanjana Dixit. Hi, Sanjana. Thanks for joining us today. We're really happy you're here. So, would you like to start off by giving a quick introduction about yourself and your initiative?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Sanjana, like you mentioned, and I'm the founder and executive director of Rutu Chakra. Rutu Chakra is a youth-led organization working to achieve menstrual equity and dignity amongst menstruators of all ages and backgrounds. And we do this in three main ways, which is one, we provide menstrual products to areas and individuals in need. Two, we promote access to relevant education surrounding this topic by conducting workshops and several follow-up sessions, and even creating educational modules for individuals who are disabled, intellectually or physically challenged, etc., because we recognize that they're an important part of the menstrual movement. And third, we promote an open and inclusive conversation surrounding periods amongst all genders. So that's kind of Rutu Chakra in a nutshell.
Okay, cool. And honestly, that's amazing work. And I've been like quite an active follower of your work. By that I've stalked you guys multiple times on all of your Instagram accounts and all of your different chapters and everything. And I just absolutely love the work that you guys are doing. And I really think that conversation should be promoted, especially in India, considering how much stigma there is around menstruation. So, what are your thoughts about it? Like when you were starting your project and everything, did you like encounter a lot of people who were like shying away from this topic of menstruation? How did you deal with that, and how do you think we can promote a healthy conversation about menstruation in India?
So yeah, definitely. I think considering the fact that menstruation has been considered a taboo topic in India and quite frankly in many parts of the world, there are people, I mean, it's linked to various sorts of stigmas, myths, stereotypes, etc. And so people were initially, of course, very hesitant to talk openly about periods, even after the word periods. You know, the fact that we have over 5,000 euphemisms that people would rather use rather than saying just the word menstruation or period just kind of tells us and helps us understand how much of a stigma it is. So when I started Rutu Chakra, we definitely did face some amount of resistance from people within the society, and in fact people within like our close communities as well, you know, in urban areas. Um, and I think in order to promote a healthy conversation, it's very important to first normalize the term menstruation because it's a natural biological process that takes place in an individual's body, which is just as normal as somebody may be breathing or eating or digesting. And we keep trying to like help people understand that it's something that should not be considered as impure and dirty, but rather something that is beautiful and empowering, and individuals should embrace it. So yeah, but I think in order to, you know, make sure that we promote a healthy conversation, it's important to normalize that term, and that happens through education. I think lack of education is the primary basis for the reason why, you know, all of these myths, stigmas, etc. exist, because when people don't understand this term and what menstruation means, they're likely to believe in literally anything and everything that people are likely to say about it, and be willing to accept the discrimination that is enforced onto them.
Wow, I think that given the lack of conversation about menstruation, I think what you guys are doing is just so incredible. I think that a majority of adolescent girls in India, particularly, they're sometimes even unaware of what menstruation is until they get it themselves because of the lack of education, the gap in our education system. And so I think helping these girls themselves and creating awareness is so important. So I wanted to ask you, how do you guys go about this? You know, do you conduct workshops and things? How do you guys help the girls themselves?
So when it comes to menstruators, what we do is we go about by conducting workshops, both in rural as well as urban areas, because this problem about menstrual inequity is prevalent in all sectors of society. So firstly, we conduct workshops where we cover different aspects of menstruation, menstrual health, and hygiene, you know, the myths, stigmas, etc., and really breaking it down. But what we do over here is we actually adopt this method of self-realization. So instead of just having facts and figures which are projected on a screen and telling individuals, look, hey, you know, whatever you've believed in so far, everything is wrong. Instead of doing that, because that leads to debate rather than a discussion. what we do is we try to help them understand by themselves why all of these myths and stigmas, etc., actually have no rational basis. So we have a very personal, conversational tone to all of our workshops. So we sit down and we talk to all of the menstruators. We listen to their experiences. We talk to them about ours so that they're comfortable having this conversation. And then we slowly, through analogies, through examples, etc., help them recognize why these myths have no rational basis. And we realize that this actually has a higher chance of success because when people themselves believe in it, they are likely to stand up for it even within their own society and their communities, and are not likely to take discrimination the next time around. Additionally, we have follow-up sessions every 3 to 6 months with these menstruators because we recognize that, just telling them about periods one time maybe will change one or two individuals' perspectives for say a week, but they're always going back into the same environment. And I'm a huge believer of the fact that an person's environment affects their mentality. And so when they're thrown back into the same environment that promotes menstrual, myths, stereotypes, discrimination of various shapes and forms, they're likely to go back into that same cycle. And so we follow up sessions every 3 to 6 months so that we can really reinforce the idea that menstruation is something that is empowering and beautiful rather than something that's impure and dirty. And kind of, help them understand if they have any questions, etc., surrounding the same.
Right. So when you were talking, you mentioned that so much of the conversation surrounding menstruation consists of myths which have no rational basis, but people still believe them anyway. So yeah, there's myths vary by regions in India, and one of the myths that I came across is that people believe that menstruating women are living goddesses and that they're pure and powerful and they shouldn't enter temples because the power will suck the life out of the idols and draw the energy from it, making them powerless, which I just sounds very iffy to me. But essentially, what I think all these myths propagate is a way of the patriarchy using our culture as a way to justify the oppression and stigmatization that women face. It is a way to like kind of indoctrinate women into thinking that they are impure and that they deserve all the exclusion that they're facing. And what it also reflects about our country and just people in general is that people are more attached to their religion and their culture than actual human beings. So knowing that these are the shortcomings of the system, why do you think people still go along with it?
Like menstrual inequity definitely plays a huge role when it comes to the gender disparity, which exists in gender inequality. I don't think it's possible to achieve gender equality unless we achieve menstrual equity first. Yes, there are so many shortcomings. There's so many aspects to this whole menstrual myths, wherein even people who are extremely educated have no idea, either have no idea about it or are willing to listen to absolutely anyone and anything people say concerning this. But I think it stems from one major thing, which is lack of education, which exists within society, which allows us to propagate this flawed mindset from generation to generation. It's important for schools or even colleges, workplaces, etc., to have appropriate sex and reproductive health education for individuals so that they're able to understand what menstrual health, etc., means, but also what reproductive health means, because this is something that's very fundamental knowledge that every individual honestly should have. Also, when it comes to non-menstruators, etc., even though they may not realize it, they play a very fundamental role within the menstrual movement because they largely determine how a menstruator undergoes their periods. And so it's important, like in terms of they play various roles within society, such as those of fathers or brothers or policymakers or employers, etc. And so even if these non-menstruators aren't educated about menstruation, they're not likely to empathize or understand where they come from. So even when it comes to politicians and the laws that they promote, etc., these laws are generally made without having any understanding about what takes place in a menstruator's body or in a woman's body. And so it's important to have like a good fundamental sex and reproductive health education to begin with. And also it's very important to kind of differentiate between religion, politics, and menstruation, because what happens in a menstruator's body should not be governed by religion or any other form. I think how these menstrual myths generally started was they started off with something where menstruation was something that was considered to be powerful. For instance, I've heard that when they say that menstruators are supposed to be, should stay outside of their houses during the menstrual process and they shouldn't enter kitchens, etc. How they originated was the fact that because during menstruation these individuals are more likely to get tired, or we want them to take care of their bodies. Through these practices they would make sure that menstruators did not have to indulge in household work and they could take appropriate amount of rest. Last year we had this boy who genuinely had zero idea about what periods were, and he thought that every month you get a cut on your vagina, and he asked us, how can you girls be so careless that every month you get a cut on your vagina, and why can't you just use a band-aid instead? And this is a 12th grader, well-educated boy, and so that just makes helps us understand what the landscape in terms of education looks like in India. So I think that's the primary basis. Flawed mindset just keeps propagating itself from generation to generation only due to the fact that there is a lack of education surrounding this topic, and so people are likely to believe in literally anything.
I think you mentioned before that you've conducted workshops in various areas, be it rural or modern. You've kind of seen people from all sectors of society. So I want to know that over the time that Ritu Chakra has been working towards this, have you noticed a change? Have you noticed a change in not just women or men, but the society itself? You keep visiting different areas, so have you seen their mentality change? Have you seen them become more comfortable talking about this openly? And not just, I think not just women, but also men. As you just said, there are some people who are not educated enough to understand what menstruation is about. So how has that changed? How have you seen that change over the time you've, started Ritu Chakra?
I think we've definitely seen that change over time. I think it takes honestly, it takes varying amounts of time for individual to come to terms with this idea that menstruation is empowering and beautiful. For some people, it takes as less as like an hour of the workshop, and for some people, it takes 2 to 3 years to come to terms with it. But we've definitely seen that change over our follow-up sessions, etc. For instance, in one of our workshops, we had somebody come over, like during our workshop, this was conducted just for girls because, again, the thing is, organizations, etc., are not open to the idea of having this workshop for boys as well. And so we have to slowly make them, come to terms with the idea and, listen to it. But till then, we had a workshop for girls, there were around 150. At the starting of the workshop, we'd ask them, how many of you will go back home today and tell individuals in your family, such as the males, etc., that you attended a menstrual health workshop. And literally nobody raised their hand. And when we asked the same question in the middle, around 15 people raised their hand. And when we asked them at the end, like literally all of them did. And in fact, 5 girls came up to me and they said, hey, and Didi, when are we going to have this for all the boys within our, within our classes, etc.? Because we want to talk to boys about this as well. And I think when I heard that, right, it definitely made me realize how much of an impact we were having, because even after out of those 150 individuals, if 5 individuals were ready to start thinking about it in this way and ready to talk to the opposite gender surrounding periods, I think we've definitely made a breakthrough. When it comes to receptiveness, I think boys are much more receptive about periods than girls are. In fact, all of my male friends, even within school, etc., are willing to talk about it openly. If you have a problem with periods, they'll be the first people to get you a hot water bag. And even within like rural areas, you've seen that individuals, the male instructors, etc., within institutions and everything, they're just curious to understand what is taking place, and they're very receptive about it. But the menstruators themselves are not, because for generations they've been told that this is a process that shouldn't be talked about openly. It's something that is intimate and personal to them, and it's used as a scope to kind of oppress them. And so, because this has been promoted from generations to generations, they themselves are hesitant to talk about menstruation and periods openly, right? So we've actually seen more resistance from menstruators rather than non-menstruators. Non-menstruators generally seem extremely open to learn more about the process, because in the lack of proper sex education, they generally don't have any idea about what happens, and they don't know how to be a good ally for menstruators. But it's the menstruators who show a lot of resistance, and so it's more difficult to actually get through to them and make them start having that conversation about periods.
Right, and I completely agree with that. And part of it can also be because the systematic oppression has been such that there have been generations and generations which have ingrained the idea into menstruators that you are impure and unworthy of the same respect that non-menstruators deserve. But
Mm-hmm.
I still think that initiatives such as yours have really helped destigmatize menstruation and kind of promote the conversation around it. And one of the ways in which this progress has manifested itself is through the implementation of period leave. So recently, Zomato announced the implementation of 10 days of period leave annually to cisgender women, non-binary individuals, or transmasculine men to deal with cramps and other menstruation-related discomforts. So this seemingly gender-sensitive decision of the corporation has received a lot of mixed reactions from feminists across countries. So what do you think about period leave? Do you think it's necessary? Is it a step in the right direction, or is it regressive? And how do you think we can unlearn the bias against menstruation in the workplace specifically?
I think it's definitely like it's a step in the right direction because when it comes, and I mean, I think like in India itself, like alone, we've seen a lot of things just in the past, like this year, where we understand that we're making a progress towards menstruation and, towards a more menstrually equal society, more menstrual equity. And it's very important, when we talk about transgenders and non-binary individuals, to make sure that they have a safe and comfortable space within the menstrual movement as well, and use terms such as menstruators and people who menstruate when we talk about periods and menstruation, instead of saying the words girls and women, so that they feel included. um, Oftentimes, people are not able to maybe grasp on the idea of the fact that transgenders or non-binary individuals are legitimate menstruators, and they discard it as the fact that if you're born as a female, you're supposed, and since biologically you are considered a female, that it does, these terms such as transgenders or non-binary individuals or your identity shouldn't really matter when we're discussing things such as periods, etc., which is why people often resist the idea of including transgenders and non-binary individuals within this conversation. Personally, I think that it's very important to respect every individual's identity, regardless of what they choose to identify as. If they're very, they're very much legitimate, and we should make sure that we respect their experiences, etc., as well. So, I mean, personally, I would say it's very important to use such inclusive terms. It's important to have such events, such weeks, etc., so that we're able to spread awareness surrounding this topic and make sure that we're continuing moving forward in terms of progress. In terms of progress in India alone, you can see things such as Prime Minister Narendra Modi was the first Prime Minister to talk about periods at the Red Fort, or Zomato started announcing period leaves. We had the movie Padman. So we're definitely moving forward in terms of progress.
Yeah, I think that's really important to note. And even for like all of our listeners and everything, I remember reading this on your page as well. It said like, not all women menstruate and not all who menstruate are women. And I think that's something that's really, really important for like everybody to note. But a question that I had on a like more micro level is that when we talk about like period leaves and things like that, I feel like in a sense that could be a slightly like more again, I don't mean privileged in the wrong way, but a slightly more privileged conversation to have, in the sense that these menstruators like ostensibly do have access to like the proper healthcare like requirements and needs to deal with their periods. One thing I do want to touch upon though is that like I think you guys did a post about this as well, was about like period poverty, especially during like COVID-19, and how like
Mhm.
underprivileged people have like lack of menstrual products and other like basic toilet facilities, and like especially due to like COVID and all of these like social isolation, social quarantine rules and everything, it can become a little bit more difficult. So how do you think that like we can use our privilege positively to like help these people?
Definitely. I think so. Firstly, just due to the coronavirus pandemic, period poverty has been even more amplified with people, losing their jobs, and actually period products, their prices like rising because in their people are hoarding stocks, etc. as well. And so during the COVID pandemic, like personally, what we noticed, even when we were trying to help individuals through Rutu Chakra, firstly, in the starting, a lot of movement was restricted. So it was very difficult to actually get period products to different areas and locations without endangering our volunteers in any way. Secondly, because state borders were generally closed down, many people had their manufacturing units, and many companies had their manufacturing units in different states. And so every time we wanted to help individuals, we had to literally find a new menstrual product manufacturing company every other day, because everybody would keep running out of stock due to manufacturing units being in different places. During the whole COVID pandemic, these individuals, they're even more vulnerable, because when healthcare should be of such prime priority, they're still, subjected to various forms of discrimination, wherein, their health is put in a very vulnerable state, and so on. And it's very difficult to educate them, etc. in this time. So recognizing all of these problems, which exist, and it's important for us to tackle it and talk about it. And as people who are privileged, even during the COVID pandemic or without, if we have 3 square meals a day, a roof over your head, and you're able to afford a proper education, that's so much more than many people can even ask for today. And so it's important to recognize your privilege as a civically responsible, like socially responsible individual, and what your role is in terms of giving back to society. And so what that could mean is, it could mean something as small as donating to organizations such as Rutu Chakra or other organizations to enable us to do what we do to help individuals during the COVID pandemic by providing them with adequate resources and conducting workshops, etc. for them. It could mean volunteering with such organizations to various degrees and extents. It could mean writing to, just as simple as writing to your politician, right? Maybe your chief minister of your state, or the prime minister of India, or whichever country that you belong to, writing them a letter talking about what these inequalities look like, and how they should be making a difference or taking it in their stride. um, and so on and so forth. So there are various ways in which people can get involved in the menstrual movement. I think the simplest of them being just raise your voice about it, because you're somebody who has a voice, and every person's voice is extremely powerful. So every time you see menstrual disparities, etc., which is present within society, or somebody who is downplaying or belittling an individual because of their menstrual cycle, etc., raise your voice against that, and make sure that you're standing up against that, because every small thing matters. But yeah, especially during the COVID pandemic period, poverty is even more amplified. So it needs all of us as a community to come together so that we can empower and uplift these underprivileged individuals as well.
Yeah, I think you spoke like really correctly and really appropriately about how we should use our privilege, and it's so amazing how you use your voice to speak about something that is a taboo, as you said. So I think on a note to end with, I know you might have partially covered this previously, but do you have any specific advice for menstruators, and not just menstruators, but the listeners who are listening to this episode right now, about how to have an open mind about such a concept, and to be very comfortable about talking about opening up, because we're a progressive society, we're moving towards being very open about these kind of stuff. So do you specifically, like, I know you partially covered, but would you have anything else to add on to?
Um, I would just say honestly, it's important to embrace menstruation as this natural biological process that takes place in your body. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. If at any point, for menstruators, that you feel that you're being oppressed, or there are various myths, stigmas, etc., which are present in society with no rational basis, either stand up for it, and stand up for it and make sure that you're not oppressed in any way, but also stand up for other menstruators and act as a good, strong, supporting menstrual ally. Even for non-menstruators, please make sure that you support the menstruators which are present within your communities, your friend groups, your peer groups, etc. Like I mentioned before, all of us are extremely privileged, to have 3 square meals a day, a roof over our head, a good education, which is so much more than people can ask for. To utilize your privilege well, to make a difference within society. And every person's voice matters. It literally just takes one person to make a large scale change. So you recognize that you have that power as well, and kind of channel it to make a difference within society.
I think that's an amazing thought to end on. One last thing, I just wanted to ask you if you wanted to just like plug yourself, tell us your Instagram handle, how we can donate to Rutu Chakra, anything like that. Just fully plug yourself.
Sure. So you can check out more about Rutu Chakra on social media, which is our Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook page, which is just at Rutu Chakra. Um, and we also have a website, which is rutuchakra.org. So go check that out. If you want to donate to Rutu Chakra, you can do so directly through our website. We also have an email ID, which is rutuchakra@gmail.com. So if you have any questions or clarifications, you can always email us there. And if you are somebody who wants to recognize your role within the menstrual movement but don't understand how to at this moment, don't worry, just always feel free to DM us or reach out to us in any way, and we would love to help you figure that out.
Okay, that's amazing advice. Again, whatever Sanjana has mentioned in this episode, we'll link it in the show notes and the details down below. So, on that note, let's wrap up today's episode. Thank you so much, Sanjana, my namesake. Thank you for coming on today's episode. We had a lot of fun speaking